My second big change is in my kit. And yeah, this one is probably the change that's taken the longest for me to do. And to be honest with you, I couldn't do the bag, change out my bag, until I had figured out my kit. See, my kit used to be a Canon 5D Mark II, and then I had the 16-35 f4L wide-angle lens, and then I had a Tamron SP 24-70 millimeter f2.8. First I had the Model 1, and then I had the Model 2, the V2 lens for my mid-range. And then I had the Canon 70-200 f4L2 lens, which was a great lens. And then I had the 45 TSE tilt shift lens, f2.8. And then I had the 90 millimeter tilt shift TSE f2.8 lens. And then I had the 100 millimeter macro lens. It was not the L version, it was f2.8 too, I believe, if I remember right, but it was still a very, very sharp lens. And then I had the Samyang 14 millimeter f2.8 that I would use for nighttime photography kind of stuff. So I had 8 lenses plus my big 5D Mark II, which had a battery grip on it. So it was a very heavy and a lot of lenses. And this bag was a champ carrying all that equipment, plus my 100 millimeter to 150 millimeter glass lens filters that I used before I moved over to the system that I've now got. So how did I go from Canon to essentially a Sony with Sigma lenses? Well, this is kind of a different story. I had my 5D Mark II, and I was seriously considering upgrading it to a different camera, but I kept waiting for Canon to come out with a camera that would cause me to make that jump. And to be honest with you, they never really did. I waited and waited. They came out with the 5D Mark III, and I rented it so that I could try it out, and discovered that it wasn't that much different than the 5D Mark II. And some of the features have been upgraded, but not really enough for a landscape person to make that kind of a jump. And so I waited. And shortly after that, or right around the same time, Sony came out with the A7R camera. And so I rented it because I was really excited at the fact that Sony had come out with a mirrorless camera. I was trying to figure out, well, what's this mirrorless thing all about anyways? Because as a landscape photographer, I would usually shoot most of my landscapes with mirror up. And so, excuse me, I would shoot most of my landscapes mirror up. And so I was trying to figure out what this mirrorless thing was all about. And of course I had the first generation Metabones adapter, and I adapted my Canon lenses to it. And I was underwhelmed. Excuse me again. Something's blooming out here and I'm reacting to it. So anyways, I waited, and Canon came out with a 5D Mark IV, and that was a really sweet camera, and I rented it a number of different times, and I seriously considered buying it because I knew that I needed to upgrade from my 5D Mark II. I love my 5D Mark II, don't get me wrong, but it was starting to get long in the tooth, and I was desperately looking for my next upgrade camera. And then they came out with a 5D S and then the 5D SR. And I really liked the 5D SR. In fact, I rented that camera probably about 10 to 15 different times. Every time I go on a major photography shoot where I'd planned if I was going to go to a national park or whatever, I would rent that camera. And at about the same time, Canon came out with a 5D, not Canon, Sony came out with the A7R II, which I also played with, and it was getting better, and I could see where the future was indeed mirrorless, even if it seemed like Canon didn't, and I waited patiently for Canon. Now, I almost got the 5D SR, and the reason that I didn't was because of the dynamic range. And I know a lot of people sit there and they say, are you serious? Dynamic range, that's going to stop you from getting a really good camera? And it is a really good camera. But you got to understand something. As a landscape photographer whose primary photography realm is landscapes, dynamic range can mean everything from having a great image to just having a good image. Sometimes you are in situations where you don't have the ability to do bracketed shots, and so you have to try to get as much as you can within the single shot. And that's where the Sony sensors excel over Canon sensors, is that extra stop or so of dynamic range, in some cases up to maybe 2 stops of dynamic range, is pretty significant. And again, for landscapes, that can be a critical factor in terms of whether or not you get a great shot. And so I waited patiently, and I waited patiently up until about middle of last year. Sony came out with the A7 R3. By that point in time, I'd rented it a couple times. In fact, I even rented it when I went to Hawaii last spring. And that, with the G Master 24 to 70 millimeter Sony lens, I decided that I was going to buy the A7R3. And so I bought the A7R3, even though I know they were coming out with the A7R4. I wasn't that thrilled with 61 megapixels versus 45 on this guy, and I figured that 45 was sufficient for what I need for right now. So I bought the A7R3, and I bought the Metabones, I think it's the 4 or 5 adapter, so that I could adapt all my Canon lenses to it. And I lived with that situation for probably about a good 6 months. I had both my Canon 5D Mark II and my A7R3 with the Metabones. And again, this bag served me well because I could carry both bodies in this thing. And I got rid of the battery grip. I had actually bought the battery grip to go with this guy, but I just found that if I'm trying to reduce my weight, and because I do landscapes, and with an L bracket, I really don't need the battery grip. As much as I really enjoy the ability to do this, instead I have to do this, but it saves me about a pound of weight. So it was only within the past 2 months that I finally decided to bite the bullet and fully go over to lenses that would fit a Sony camera. I waited until Canon came out with the R5, which I have to be honest, looks like a really sweet camera. But the price point was just, well, it's just ridiculous. Between the price point of what they were asking for it, as well as the cost of the lenses, I just could not afford it. Pure, plain and simple. It would be, for me to get the kind of lenses that I would want in the body, I was looking at $15,000 to $20,000 of investment. Their lenses are minimally $2,500. Some of them are $3,000 a piece. And so if you buy 3 or 4 lenses, I mean, you're already up to 12 grand, and that's before you even spend, what, $3,500 on the body. So it was just, I just didn't have that kind of money. Landscape photographers don't make that much. And so I decided to rent, because I had rented the G Master, so I decided to rent the Sigma 24 to 70 f2.8 DG-DN lens. And paired with this body, I fell in love with this lens. And the apertures that I shoot, which generally tends to be around f8 to f16, this lens is tack sharp. I mean, it produces images that I had only hoped for on my Canon system with all that L glass. These Sigma lenses are just fantastic. I just have to say that up front. And this was like a $1,200 lens, and the G Master is around $2,400, and so it's half the price, but it's just as good a lens. And again, I do landscapes. If I did portraits and if I did sports photography, that might be a little bit different. But the Sigma A series, their art lenses, are just fantastic. I don't have any complaints about them. I think they're absolutely fantastic. And so I decided, after doing a bunch of reviews and knowing how well that particular lens operated, I got the 14-24 f2.8 wide-angle lens, which I've shot with a couple of times, and I have to say, does not at all disappoint. It's a fantastic lens, and it's internal zoom, which I really, really like. The only thing with this lens that I wasn't that thrilled about is that it has a fixed lens hood, so you can't put filters on the front. The filters instead go on the back. And one of the major things that I do with wide-angle lenses is I'll often, if I find myself a waterfall, I'm going to want to use this kind of lens so I can get a nice foreground and I get the waterfall, but I need to slow down that water. And so that's where those Hyeta filters that are in my bag, they pop into the back there. And so far they haven't disappointed. So the only thing left was really to talk about was to get some kind of a telephoto. And I, after much consternation and much thinking and much debating and much reviews and reading reviews, essentially I settled on the Sigma Contemporary 100 to 400 millimeter lens. And I have to say that I haven't been all that disappointed with it. Now, I went to the San Diego Zoo last weekend and I took a bunch of bird photos. And again, I'm a landscape guy. I'm not a birding guy, but I figured that if anything's going to test how good this lens is, it's going to be trying to shoot birds. And so I'll come out with a video on that, on how well and how successful I was in shooting birds. But I think that they probably came out fine just based on what I could see. When I magnified the photos on the back of my camera, they looked perfectly fine. So anyways, I've gone from 8 lenses down to just these 3. And these 3 lenses so far seem to be working really, really well with this camera. The only thing that I might do is I'm probably going to do an upgrade to the Sony a7R IV so that I can use this as my backup body. But that's the only change that I'm probably going to make here anytime in the near future. I do miss my tilt shift lenses. They were great for doing nice panoramas, and so I may pick up eventually another tilt shift. I'm not sure if I'd go with the 45 again, or if maybe I'd go down to the 24. I don't know. 24 is kind of wide, and I usually like to have focused panos rather than just large global huge scenes that are just longer. I generally like to do panos on more tightly focused scenes, and to be honest with you, that's what I would use this guy here for. But anyways, so those are my changes, and really the body itself happened about 6 months ago, or a little more than that, maybe about 9 months ago. And I got rid of my Canon body around the 1st of the year, and then the lenses here have all happened within the past 60 days. I picked up these lenses. I got rid of my Canon lenses. I sold them off to Adorama. It was simple and quick. I sent them all to Adorama. They came back with a price quote, and I said, sounds great. And I took that price, the money that I got from those lenses, and I got these 2 guys in the deal. I threw it, I think, like a extra $100 in or something like that. And I was able to pick up these 2 guys. So anyways, new bag, new kit, new lenses, new adventures. So change can be good, even if it is at times difficult. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope maybe there's something that you can get out of this. If so, leave comments down below and let me know. And we'll talk with you later. Thanks. Goodbye.